Bilpah and Dinah had been friends for years. They'd known each other since they were little. And they both worked at the same job. And they both slept in the same room. In fact, they both got pregnant at the same time. A bit of an occupational hazard. They gave birth within 3 days of each other. And they both had beautiful baby boys. Now, Dinah didn't get that mother rush that you're told that you get when you've just had your baby. Everything was fine. He was beautiful and he was lovely, and she was going to look after him and do the best she could for him, but that was, it was okay. Bilpah, on the other hand, was absolutely besotted from the moment she saw him. She couldn't do enough for him. In fact, the child very rarely got a chance to cry, because the first whimper and she was in there. What does he need? And everything had to be so close to her. In fact, it got so bad that she even decided that she would take him to bed with her, so she could be with him all the time. And as it happened, that didn't turn out to be a very good idea. One evening, when the babies were just a few weeks old, the two women had given their night feeds and laid the children down to rest. And as anybody who's been a new mother will testify, you're absolutely exhausted. And they both lay down. Dinah put her baby in his crib at the bottom of the bed, and Bilpah laid him down next to her, and they just heads hit the pillow and they were asleep. During that evening, in her totally exhausted state, Bilpah rolled over and smothered her child. It was the early hours of the morning when she suddenly started to think, hang on, there's something not quite right here. He's not wriggled and moved like he normally does. As she unwrapped the blankets, she realised to her horror what she'd done. And the grief and the pain hit her so hard. The total remorse. I have killed my child. I have killed the one that I loved more than anything else in the whole world. And it was at that point that something switched in her brain. And it allowed her to think the unthinkable. Dinah doesn't really love her baby. Not like I loved my baby. Look, he's in a crib at the end of the bed. She can't really be bothered about him. Not like I would. I would love that baby beyond any measure. In fact, I deserve that baby more than anything. Maybe that's what this is all about. Maybe I was never supposed to have this baby. Maybe that's my baby. And before she knew what she was doing, she'd replaced her lost love for Dinah's child. Well, she wasn't really bothered, so she won't really notice. Well, the sun came up and Dinah noticed. And boy, did she let everybody know about it. What are you doing stealing my child? What, that child's dead. You've killed your baby and you've got my baby. No, I haven't. It's my baby. You don't know what you're talking about. You didn't want your baby anyway, so it doesn't matter if he's died in his sleep. This is my baby. And it went on and on and on, backwards and forwards, and the baby began to scream because he didn't know what was happening. The boss heard what was going on downstairs. Well, in fact, the whole house heard what was going on, and nobody was going to get any more sleep at this point. So he came up to try and intervene and to try and some reason and some calm, but there was no calming these two down. Both women were adamant that this was their child. In fact, by this point, Bilpah really believed that this was her child. What could he do? He couldn't have them carrying on like this. It was bad for business. But as it happened, at that time in Jerusalem, they'd got a fairly new king. The guy was called Solomon. Now, the word around town was that Solomon had been granted extraordinary wisdom from God. Well, let him sort these two out. If God's given him this wisdom, then see what he can do. So he got hold of the two of them and he walked them through town. And as was the custom, the king would sit on certain days and he would sit on his huge seat, on the judgment seat, and people would come with their disputes and he would queue up and he would sit there all day and one after the other and he'd sort out their problems. So it was quite a long queue and it was quite hot. And the boss thought it would calm them down, but it didn't. I told you shouldn't come in. I told you murdered my child. Yeah, okay. But no matter how far apart he tried to put them, there was no stopping these two. The passion within them for being right just grew and grew and grew. They arrived at the court and they were shown in, and even Solomon himself had to brace himself for the onslaught that came through the door. The child was laid at his feet and he listened patiently as the two women told their view of events. So what could Solomon do? What would he do? He leaned over to the servant at the side, gave him some instructions, and the servant scurried on and came back with a sword. Now this sword stood about 1.5 meters high. The hilt was made of pure gold and set with rubies. The blade, a broad sword, was made from polished bronze inlaid with silver. And as the sun streamed through the gaps in the windows, it glinted on its razor edge. Solomon looked at the two women and said, if you cannot decide who this child belongs to, then I will decide, and I will cut the child in two, and you can both have a piece. As he raised his sword up above his head, Bilpah looked, and in her confused state, she looked down and all she could see was she was going to get some of this child. That was all she heard. He's going to agree, he's going to give me part of this child. And I'm going to be right, and I'm going to have my baby. So she said, yeah, okay, go ahead, do it. Dinah, on the other hand, it was her turn for something to switch. And this feeling started to grow from somewhere deep down inside her that she'd never felt before. And it started to move out throughout her whole body, and her heart began to beat faster. And she found it difficult to breathe as she thought she was going to explode. What was this feeling? It was love. She felt more than anything else the most incredible, overwhelming love for this child. More than anything she'd ever felt before. And even though she wanted her child, if the only way to keep him alive was to allow Bilpah to have him, then as his mother, that's what she would do. Because being right didn't matter anymore. His life was what mattered now. So as Solomon raised his sword over his head, he heard, "Stop! You can't do it! I need him to live. I need him to grow up. I need him to play with his friends. And if it's the only way I can do that is by letting her have him, then that's what I will do." Solomon lowered his sword and smiled. I think we found the true mother. The two women left for home that day. One of them happy, content, overflowing with love. The other sad, broken, and very much in need of love. And Solomon? Well, even after all these years, he's still considered to be the wisest person that ever lived.